John Summers is the motoring historian. He was a company car thrashing technology sales rep that turned into a fairly inept sports bike rider. Hailing from California, he collects cars and bikes built with plenty of cheap and fast, and not much reliable. On his show, he gets together with various co-hosts to talk about new and old cars, driving, motorbikes, motor racing, and motoring travel.
Good day, good morning, good afternoon. It is John Summers, the motoring historian. Went to Mexico over Christmas and the New Year. Didn't intend to have any sort of, it wasn't like a motoring focused trip or anything like that. But whilst I was there were interesting cars. So I thought I'd put together this sort of, motorcycles of Mexico. I was originally going to call it, but really what's more interesting is a number of Chinese EVs that there are in Mexico. And I guess my podcast bros were talking about the number of BYDs there are on the streets of Dubai, where they are, and that had me thinking there weren't so many in Puerto Vallarta where we stayed, but there were a lot of Chinese EVs in Mexico City. Yeah, so the invasion of the Chinese, it's really here. I guess my first thought of it was when we were standing in immigration before we even went into the country. There was a Geely ad, and my first thought of translating the money was it was under 600,000 pesos, and I was like, what the devil is that in meaningful money? Well, under 25 grand US. So in other words, those domestic OEM makers who won't sell you a car for less than 40 grand. These guys, they're selling you a car for 20 grand, 25. It was like, this was like a RAV4-ish CRV kind of affair. It looked like last generation RAV4, frankly. So this is my note, the invasion is well underway. So we rode in BYD cabs. This is Build Your Dreams. That's what it stands for. Now, I should say I first heard of them when they came to San Francisco and with the buses. The bus company was BYD. Then probably 2 or 3 years ago, they bought a spot on Peter Hay Hill for Pebble Beach Week. So, if you come to Pebble Beach, as you walk down the hill before you get in the show, usually the car makers like, Maybach or Bentley or Bugatti, they might have a spot there. Well, BYD did as well, just to be like, hey, we're building cars. They had some chewing gum, I remember, that they gave away. Not very tasty gum, but I didn't hold that against BYD. So I guess the headline about these BYD cabs is that one of the cabs we rode in had 200,000 kilometers on it. And it was wearing it, like a taxi cab would, It looked like it had done 200, it looked like it had done plenty of miles, but it was still together. The panel fit was there. It was, it was walking and talking like a Nissan or a Toyota might look. And that's really the headline here, that the Mexican market used to be all about Nissans, didn't it? I remember going there 20 years ago when you couldn't move for the Nissan Sentra, which they had badged there as the Tzuru TSURU, like everything was that. And they loved the stick shift ones, not the automatics, because they lasted longer. That was why. And I remember asking a cabbie why Nissan, not Toyota. And he was like, Toyota's for the personal car, but Nissan is the work car. Always remember him saying that. Well, anyway, the Sentras, there are Sentras there, and a couple of the cabs we rode in were Sentras and stick shift Sentras. But yeah, a lot of these BYDs, complete model range, like a little, like Fiesta sized one, and like a sort of, Ford C-Max sized one, and a sort of RAV4 CRV sized one. They seem to be a complete model range for BYD. Now, look, you're not going to mistake it for a new Audi in terms of build quality or design, but if you were Nissan, you would be absolutely quaking in your boots at how good these products are. The BYD SUV particularly, it had the feel of a Kia about it. You know, that the design was exciting, as well as it visibly, as well as you being aware that it was, you know, a very well priced product. The little BYD SUV, the little BYD like car sized thing, it has like a little chevron in its like hip line. You know, are you looking at it being like Alpha 159 eat your heart out? No. Is it a lot more design flair than I was expecting from a first generation Chinese maker? Oh, absolutely. I looked for the panel fit to be bad. It wasn't. There was a pink, a sort of mauvey pink one of these little BYDs as well. I mean, not my choice, but in that kind of nail polish hue that makes that car, I must have that one for certain people, usually women, young women. I'm not knocking them for it. You know, I'm just saying this is a niched, well-designed, well-considered product. So Nissan must be quaking in their boots. And I guess they are, because in this last couple of weeks, we had the announcement of the merger with Honda. And I did read one particular headline that was that CEO of Honda struggles to explain benefit of Nissan merger. And if you think of it from Honda's perspective, what exactly is the benefit? Well, I'm going to answer that question. I think it's size. I think it's not letting a fellow Japanese company fail, but I think it's size as well. I think they recognize that Honda are too small to survive on their own. So, you know, they need the kind of economies of scale that Stellantis and Fiat and Citroën and Vauxhall have been trying to establish. But my God, it's bleak for Stellantis, isn't it? But let's not drill on that. Let's focus on where we were in Mexico City there, because it was not just BYDs, it was MG as well. So MG2 appear to have a complete model range, or if not a complete model range, they seem to be doing little sedans, little premium coupe sedans, and that sort of ubiquitous BMW X1, RAV4 kind of size little SUV. So we had a ride in a Mazda 5, in an MG5 cab, and it was nice in a sort of, you know, I put in a Vauxhall or 5-year-old Toyota kind of way. So not like compelling design or anything like that, but just a whole lot nicer than you were expecting. You'd have thought this was a Suzuki or a 5-year-old Toyota, not something that's a first generation offering from a Chinese maker. So this MG5 we were in, it was leatherish. It did nicely on the motorway. We drove on this like raised section of freeway across Mexico City, and it was handy along there. As I say, you know, you're not looking at them being like, this is the best design I've ever seen. But what you are saying is that you were just in the market for a nice car. If this was 20% less than anything else on the market, you would definitely buy it. That's what we're saying. It's the old Kia Skoda value proposition going on here. Cecil Kimber must be absolutely spinning in his grave, right? But who knows? The notion of MGs being all over Mexico, that might really appeal to him, mightn't it? The notion that Morris is long forgotten, but MG survives across the world, associated with this new, dynamic, vibrant brand. But you say, doesn't an MG have to be a sports car? No, it has to be sporting. And I think anything electric is sporting to drive, isn't it? It's got vim and verve and all of that. But it has to be a 2-seater sports car. Yeah, a lot of MGs were, but magnets weren't. YBs, wasn't it the YB, that pre-war looking sedan that they did that everyone said drove really, really well? Everyone of my dad's age said drove really well. Yeah, you know, I'm not completely weirded out by MG, and I was quite enjoying, you know, the thought of Cecil Kimber and his badge, his Octagon badge, being, you know, high above Mexico City there as the sports bikers weaved amongst us. So I put design, panel fit, interior fit and finish, again, really good. It was for the BYD. I didn't talk about the BYD cab. it had one of these like suicide doors in the middle, so it's very easy to get in and out of. And the parts of the interior were white and they had discolored, but mostly it was holding up really well. It was like holding up like a Toyota would at 200,000 miles, not like Vauxhall would at 200,000 miles or 200,000 kilometers, which is what, like 120,000 miles, 125, something like that. Either way, it looked used but not tired. You know, it looked like 60,000 miles, not like 120 or 200,000 kilometers as this guy was wearing. There were some Great West motors knocking around in Mexico City. I didn't experience them, sadly. I just like saw them from afar. So the cabs that I rode in were current generation Sentras, or what we get here as Versas. Not the Nissan Note, the model up from that Nissan Versa. It's like a decontented version of probably what you get in Europe. But anyway, they were stick shift. Also had a couple of cab rides in Chevy Sparks, or they do like a facelift of the Chevy Spark called the Chevy Beat. Anyway, each of these things was a stick. Each of them was wearing more than 200,000 kilometers, and they looked way worse than the BYD did. They really looked like they weren't able to wear it. The lower mile ones, you know, there were a few, you know, clearly 250 is pushing it, 120 Ks, and the things feels, well, not like a new car, but it feels not like the kind of car that would in no way in hell pass an MOT. Because, of course, that is the thing. It makes me laugh. I follow these YouTubers and they're like, oh, you know, we feel more comfortable MOTing our cars, even though we don't legally have to do it. I'm like, you know, bloody Mexico, you're sitting in the cab coming from the airport and you're watching the car next to you on the freeway. And as it's slowing down, the wheels just wobbling backwards and forwards because obviously the tie rod and the suspension and all those rubber components are just completely shot away. I mean, it's just, yeah, you need to spend some time south of the border a little bit to really see how the other side live when it comes to beta cars. So I guess because I was like looking at the cars and because we'd ridden in the MG, I started looking more closely at the bikes that were scattered curbside there. So there's very few BMWs. There's a couple of them. And actually on our way out to the airport, right as we were leaving, we passed a big Triumph showroom. But that's not what's like parked up, lurking on the streets. Now, I didn't really delve too closely into the mopeds, so I'm not going to talk about the mopeds, but there are scads of them and scads of EV ones and things as well. But I'm going to focus mostly on the motorcycles. These are mostly poxy sub 250cc affairs, which is a bit tragic. You know, I have to say, when I got back to my garage here in California, I like surveyed my like liter bikes here and was just like so relieved I've been able to get hold of these things whilst I can, because these bikes that we're looking at in Mexico, they have all the like fronting and maxing of a sports bike, but really, you know, it's all in this sort of modern, faintly pathetic wrapper, but kind of interesting anyway, right? So pathetic in comparison to a 20-year-old Gixxer, but nonetheless a motorcycle and kind of cool. So look, right, most of what they've got is knockoffs of Honda CG125s. So this is like your basic 125cc motorcycle, like if you're in England, like the thing that you did your CBT on. But these things, they have front drum brakes, a lot of them. Drum brakes at the front. I mean, I was just, and some of these bikes, they're like brand new. They're still making these things. I can't remember the maker. One of the makers was this company Vento, who I'm going to talk about more in just a moment. So Vento make them, and it was actually Vento who I was looking at most closely because they do this Ducati rip-off, which I think is called the Ripper or the Scorcher or something. And then they do a sort of a Prelius KTM Super Duke kind of rip-off. Little bike, but what it is instead of the CG125, this is like contented it up. It looks better. It's got like drum brakes. It's got better tires. You know, you can tell this is a contented up bike, even if it might seem a bit, you know, poxy in comparison to what you might be used to as an American or or a European. So these guys, Vento, it blew my mind, right? I wikied them up. Based in San Diego, sell more motorcycles in Mexico last year than Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Suzuki put together. So no wonder they were all over the place, right? And, if you're living in Mexico City, I mean, the life expectancy on these bikes has got to be under 5 years before they've just got the bejesus kicked out of them. I mean, it's like motorcycles, Jim, but not as we know them. It's life, Jim, but not as we know it. That was what I was thinking. Anyway, this is other brand, CF Moto, and they seem to do some rip-off of the BMW GS. It had the same kind of like high mudguard and asymmetrical headlight, but it was all done on like a sort of, 2/3 scale. It was like a GS, like for sort of play size. And then you look at it and you're like, hang on a minute, bloody potholes on this road. Maybe you do need a knockoff adventure bike. Right, I was cynical at first, and then I was like, maybe this is kind of cool. Anyway, I'll let you be the judge. I took some pictures. All sub 250, all with these LCD displays, which is like weird to me. I mean, because so few of my bikes have LCD displays, but I guess the youngest bike I have is like a 2005, isn't it? So, that's 20 years old now, isn't it? So I wrote here, if you've not looked at real examples, the copies seem to measure up. And that's right. It's like you look at this Vento Scorcher on the other side of the street and you think, well, that's a stylish little thing. And it's only when you get a bit closer, you're like, oh, yeah, it's a rip-off of a Ducati. That's why it looks like that, or an Aprilia, right? But that's why it has that like, oh. But, if you're not thinking that, if you're just like looking at it in comparison to these CG125s and, no-name mopeds, EV mopeds, so that was interesting. So what I should say, and I'll include a picture of this, was outside the hotel, I did see a bike that was a Suzuki, and it was badged as a Gixxer. Literally, it was a Suzuki Gixxer, not a GSX-R 250, but a Suzuki Gixxer. What an odd little piece it was. It made me all the more glad that I have the Gixxers here. It may have fed into the fact that I just wrote a letter home to my family, Chris Smith letter home to my family for 2024. And in it, I said, I'm not going to buy any more Gixxers. And then that very day, I got tangled up in an auction, and I've just bought a third 89 1100, which I'm going to go and pick up in Santa Monica at the end of next week. It's an affliction, isn't it? It's only $1,300 or something. I mean, it's scandalous. The bike's got to be worth at least 3 times that. This one's come from England, so we'll have to see if I can get hold of an English plate for it or something. So in that ride on the MG, did see just one Gixxer. I said that there were sports bikes filtering past a bunch of guys on Italian bikes. It was like obviously out for a weekend ride. And one guy was on a sort of 05, 06, that kind of age, 750, red and black 750. It was the most desirable vehicle I saw in the time that I was in Mexico. Of course, there were more valuable cars there, but that was the only thing I looked at and thought, ooh, I want that. Makes you realize how lucky you are in California, really. What I wrote was, I'm more bemused than horror-stricken. I mean, we knew it was coming, right? But I'm bemused by the speed of this Chinese invasion. I think the motorcycle show, and indeed what happened to the British motorcycle industry, this shows how devastating it's going to be. These Volkswagen layoffs, they're just the beginning. Is there going to be a Renault? Is there going to be a Nissan? Is there going to be a Volkswagen, in the year 2035? There's going to have to be a lot of upping competitiveness if we're to take on, because it's not just BYD, right? It's also guys like Vento, who are rebadging they're a domestic maker. That's an American maker with American sales and marketing. Those people who design those bikes, they know what an Aprilia Tuono looks like. They know what's cool about a KTM Duke. They know that. I can see that. That's why it's worth doing this pod and talking about it. But the BYDs, in some ways, they were more terrifying than the Ventos because it's good design and they can clearly wear the mileage. Like that cab that had 200,000 kilometers on it. I mean, that was like, wow, like no wonder Nissan are terrified. No wonder. As a sales manager of mine used to say, panic early and panic well. And I feel like that's perhaps what Nissan are trying to do. So, yeah, should I be horror stricken? No, because it's been coming for a long time. Am I sad if BMW go bust? Well, yeah, but are they really making anything that I really love now? Not in comparison to what they were making 25 years ago. I mean, just stop and think about what they were making even in 2010, when they had the cojones to be making a sedan with a Formula One inspired V10 that revved to $9,000. I mean, that was what they used to be doing. And now, I don't know. That Neue Klasse that I learned about recently, that BMW dynamic lighting design that I learned about just recently, there's definitely still good ideas, but I don't know, maybe the whole ethos of car design at the moment is less interesting than it used to be. Maybe the whole fact that people are focused on the screen and it grows out of the screen. I don't know. I mean, I find myself talking about these EVs, they all seem to kind of drive pretty similarly. And, so I'm not sure. Maybe that's why I'm more bemused rather than horror stricken at it. Maybe my horror has expressed itself in the purchase of yet another GSX-R, which I really don't need, but probably won't be able to bring myself to sell after I've spent loads of money putting tires and chains and all the other shit that it needs onto it. So let's conclude then. The bikes, whatever. It's a totally different market from Europe and the US. So, India has their Bajaj, Mexico has their CG125 knockoffs with drum brakes. It's fine, isn't it? We've got our Gixxers and, you can still buy a Velocette KTT in the auctions if you want to. So no harm, no foul with the bikes. But the cars, the full model ranges, the fact that they're not just coming, it's not just bloody Lada with one model. No, they've got, and it's not just, the Riva with the big grille they've done the SUV and the small and the large and the hybrid and their pure EV. They are coming with, and it's not just BYD, it's MG, it's Great Wall Motors, this other brand that I forget the name of that we saw when we were down in Puerto Vallarta. So it's many players, and I just wonder what the second generation players are going to look like. And what I mean by that is the car that took us to the airport when we were leaving Puerto Vallarta was some Chinese brand that I'd never heard of before. It was on my wife's Uber and she was like, it's a whatever. And I was like, what's that? She went, it's red. And I was looking and I was like, is it a Nissan Sentra? And she went, no, but the number plate was right. Well, it turns out it was some rebranded Nissan Sentra. It looked like a Nissan Sentra, but it wasn't badged as a Nissan Sentra. So that's right. They are these Chinese, the Chinese products that are coming are in all shapes and flavors, and they're going to meet all market points. It's Temu taking on Amazon. Oh, it's a thing, guys, and it's coming very soon. So what's that going to look like in a decade? Well, I mean, I'm brooding on it. I'm reminded of those Chevy Corollas, those Toyota Corollas that were rebadged as Chevys in the 1990s. Or you might remember the Mitsubishi Mighty Maxes that were repackaged as Dodge Ram 50s. So in order to get access to the domestic market, the Japanese allowed their products to be rebranded and sold by the domestic makers. And that's what I think we're likely to see happening. In other words, are BYD going to come here as BYD? Yeah, but they're also going to come here as BYD, but wearing a Chrysler badge, so they sell better in domestic makers, and Chrysler are going to be happy to take 10% of margin or whatever it is they can make, just in the hope that they can survive. I think that's what it's going to look like in the years to come. On that rather depressing note, thank you, Drive Through.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.